in charge, or calling her the border czar. She thought that was unfair, so on and so forth. And I think on the flip side, he looks at her doing these word salads in Poland, and then recently she was talking at an internet conference or communications conference, and she went on. It reminded me of like days in college when it's like, okay, who's got the bong, talking about on and on about the passage of time. I mean, she's a vice president. She's not a sorority sister. This is a joke.
Yeah, I think Dana Perino over on Fox actually, I think, phrased it best. She said it's like she was told she had to talk for 4 to 7 minutes, and she was just padding the speech to get to 7 minutes.
Absolutely. It's like being a teacher and you get tests in and students trying to pad, the number of pages, restating the question on the page just to
Yes.
fill. So yeah, exactly. She says she needs to get up there. She has no idea what she's talking about. So the passage of time and time passages, it's a brutal display. But interesting
And
enough, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
what I don't understand is, when Donald Trump went off script, he was a disaster. And when Biden goes off script, he's a disaster. And both of them have were basically told, look, here's the teleprompter, stick to what's on the teleprompter. Why is nobody reining in Harris and saying just read what's on the teleprompter?
I don't know. Maybe she's. I don't know. I wouldn't even go there. I will argue a little bit or push back a little bit. I think, yeah, when Trump went off teleprompter, he might have angered people because he ruffled feathers, went,
Yes.
misspoke, but no one questioned his competency. They might have questioned the direction, his thought, not his thought process, what he was talking about, his policy direction, but not his competency. And there's a big difference between
No,
Biden and
nobody.
Harris. When they
Yeah,
talk, you're like, what
nobody
the hell
questions.
is going on?
Yeah, nobody questions Trump when he goes off
You
teleprompter.
might
And in fact,
disagree. Fair enough. Yes.
right. And in fact, just recently at an event, he riffed an hour and a half speech.
Which
And he
Biden couldn't riff for a minute without
no,
mumbling, stumbling, and all the above. But speaking of Trump, though, I think that crazy to say this, but I really am listening to more and more pundits and reading more information. I don't know if he's the foregone conclusion. There's a recent poll that came out that said he's 3 points ahead of Biden. Well, you could say that's really great, but my cat Carl polled 8 points ahead.
right,
A dead body did four.
with Biden's approval rating, anybody should be doing more than 3 points ahead. Trump is still an incredibly divisive figure, and the Republicans know that. And I honestly believe Trump has been the front runner so far, primarily because Republican pundits and Republican candidates have been very concerned about Trump followers not showing up for other candidates. But Glenn Youngkin in Virginia gave them the roadmap because he was endorsed by Trump, but he didn't campaign with Trump. He didn't talk about Trump. He made sure, despite the fact that the Democrats kept trying to make the campaign about Trump, he kept it on the issues. He got Trump voters to turn out. He got centrists to turn out. He even got some moderate Democrats to vote for him. So Youngkin gave them the blueprint on how to run these campaigns come November to keep the Trump followers in the party and not, splitting off to another Tea Party.
Yeah, but
And
isn't it also a point of that there's no one to compare or juxtapose Trump in terms of formally? Like if you had DeSantis out there campaigning or someone else, a younger, someone without so much baggage but very articulate, very much on board with the America First agenda. I don't know if Trump's just a hollow vessel ready for implosion. I think the
I
latter.
I think what's going to happen, and it's way too early for anybody to be campaigning for 2024, but I think what you're going to see is the policies that Trump put forward are going to be adopted by other candidates. Now, we said this a number of times. Trump's message was great, but he was a terrible messenger.
No, his policies were
His
great. His messages were crazy.
No, no, no. His message about America first and how
Oh
we
yeah,
have
no, no, I
to,
agree. Okay, 100%. Yes,
yeah,
and
but
it
he
resonated. Yes.
right, but he was the wrong messenger. He was a terrible messenger for this. I think as other people are picking up on it, and you're going to see a lot of candidates pick up on that message because Biden walked into office, undid everything that Trump, put forward, and look at the disaster it caused.
I think some of
So
his handlers. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
all they have to do is go, well, yeah, look what happened under these policies and look what happened when Biden repealed them. So when
100%
you have
agreed.
so when you have other candidates with the message who are better messengers, you're going to see Trump is not going to be the flag bearer for the party.
The elephant in the room, though, is how do you diffuse Trump without him having a hissy fit? I mean, obviously, I'm sorry to say he's not the most mature individual, even though he's 75 or something of that nature. I mean, there's middle school students that have are more intact.
Yeah, I honestly think he will throw a hissy fit. He will, throw temper tantrums. But if the other candidates can go, look, we're your successors, we're taking your policies further, that may placate him a little bit. What's really going to be important is having more moderate and centrist Republicans turn out in the primaries. Because even if he whines about, fake news and he doesn't believe the polls or he doesn't believe the vote, if he doesn't win the primary, there's not a lot he can do.
Agreed. And one thing about marketing and reading the tea leaves, you can't just assume because a small group is saying one thing that's how it is. But I will say, in my circle of political friends that basically are on the conservative side, every one of them said, "Yeah, same like you just said." Trump, his policies are fantastic. The overall message, his implementation he was a disaster, and so was his messaging in terms of the actual on the ground message. It was just a disaster, and everyone I've talked to wants him to go away. He had his time. He lost to someone that's essentially a mental midget. It's time for you to go. You blew your chance.
Essentially, that's it. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Time's up, as they say. Now you have a very interesting story about the spying on spy agencies looking into Project Veritas. In fact, the New York Times is basically and the ACLU taking Project Veritas's side, aren't they?
Yeah, it's not spying agencies, it's the Department of Justice that's doing this. Now, if you remember, flip the time machine back about 8 years. Under the Obama administration, the Department of Justice did this, and the FBI did this same thing to the Associated Press. So, this is, again, the Democrats weaponizing government against their political enemies. This time, however, Project Veritas is not going to be quiet about it. The ACLU has issued a statement in their defense. The New York Times is questioning the actions that were taken by the Southern District of New York against Veritas journalists. It You've seen the press go, all right, you know what? Enough is enough.
Well, speaking of enough is enough, Bill Maher, I used to watch him years ago. I enjoyed him. Uh, a noteworthy liberal had a really interesting quote, and it's funny. I mean, is his ideology starting to wane? Because he had a quote that he believes that the state of California, I don't concur with this, but it's at least a fantasy of mine. But his thought is that California will actually turn red. And here's his quote: "Because people can't do an effing thing around here."
Yeah, Bill Maher has been standing up to the Democrats, and I don't think his ideology has changed any. It's just that the Democratic Party went much further to the left than his ideology.
Which is
He's
pretty
he's a,
far left.
right. I mean, he's a liberal, but compared to the Squad and the Progressive Caucus, he's almost centrist. So
Exactly.
they
That's how
went
far things have
so
gone.
yeah, they went so far to the left that they've lost the Democratic base, which goes to what we were talking about earlier. The Democrats have essentially alienated their own people to the point that they've got no bench, they've got no credibility. And honestly, I think what really bothers me about it is that the Democrats let it go this far. Because let's face it, the progressives, most of them identify themselves as democratic socialists.
Hmm.
The head of the Progressive Caucus identifies herself with the Working Families Party. Even Bernie Sanders represents himself as an independent socialist, except when it's time for him to run for president, and then he rejoins the Democratic Party. So these are people who were not Democrats. They came in and hijacked the party. And I blame Schumer, I blame Pelosi, I blame the mainstream Democrats for allowing this to happen.
That's a point that anyone would find hard to argue with. I also think that again, it's sometimes it's just the fear factor. I think they were scared to death of being called out by AOC. Again, these people are old. They're all into their what Pelosi's into her 80s, Schumer's into his late 70s. I mean, they've lost the A game, so they're scared. And they're not used to this kind of pushback with AOC and the Squad. And I think they were scared shitless, quite frankly. Something that
I
just go ahead.
I think they were scared, but you know what? Well, one, that's not an excuse,
I
but
know that.
two, they shouldn't have been scared because they saw this happening back in the 1980s after Carter's disastrous presidency, after um, the far left candidates that they put up against Nixon and who got blown away.
McGovern.
Well, McGovern, chief among them. The Democrats knew this was going to happen. That's why they put the superdelegates into play. They created the superdelegates exactly to stop Barack Obama from becoming president. And when the time came to pull the plug, they went, well, we didn't expect it to be an African American. If we use the superdelegates, we're going to be called racist. Well, then you got what you asked for, and the whole party shifted left because they refused to use the safety valve that they themselves put in.
Well said. Last thing, as we were on the air, a news flash just came my way that former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright is dead at 84. Any thoughts on that? Obviously, we mourn anyone's passing. Yes.
Yeah, Madeleine Albright was a trendsetter. She was honestly, I believe one of the most capable Secretary of States we've ever had. And it's really a shame that we have lost her. And, we talk a lot about ticking off boxes. Madeleine Albright gained her power with, not because they ticked off boxes,
Through accomplishment.
yeah, because she was accomplished. She knew what she was doing. She stood up and did what needed to be done. And it didn't matter that she was a woman or a man or whatever. This was somebody that everybody in both parties respected. And that's what we need more of in Washington.
And didn't she get her inspiration from Kamala? Just kidding.
Oh, sure.
Anyway, well, it's another edition of Carnivore Bites. We'll be back next week, and I like the